You wake up one morning and realize you've been living as a stranger to yourself. Not dramatically, not obviously, but quietly, consistently. You've been someone you don't recognize. The person in the mirror has your face, but lives by rules you never consciously chose, follows patterns you can't explain, repeats cycles you swore you'd break. This is where self-transformation begins. Not with inspiration, but with horror. The horror of recognizing you've been sleepwalking through your own existence. Self-transformation isn't what the self-help industry sells you. It's not positive affirmations in the mirror, or vision boards, or morning routines. It's psychological death and rebirth, and like physical death, it's terrifying, painful, and absolutely non-negotiable if you want to actually live rather than just exist. The first thing to understand about transformation is that your current self will resist it with every fiber of its being. Not because it's weak or scared, but because its job is to keep you exactly as you are. Your ego is a survival mechanism, and survival means predictability, even if what's predictable is misery. Your patterns, even the destructive ones, are familiar. Your wounds, even though they hurt, are known quantities. Your limitations, even though they constrain you, feel safe. I knew a woman who stayed in the same dead-end job for 15 years, complaining every single day. She had skills, opportunities, offers from other companies. But every time she got close to leaving, something would happen. She'd get sick, have a family crisis, find a reason why the new opportunity wasn't quite right. Her unconscious was manufacturing these obstacles because transformation, even positive transformation, registered as death to her psychological system. The psychology of self-transformation begins with what Carl Jung called circumambulation, circling around your center, spiraling closer to who you really are beneath all the adaptations. You don't transform in a straight line. You circle the same issues, the same patterns, the same wounds, each time understanding them a bit deeper, integrating a bit more. It looks like you're going backwards sometimes. It feels like you're making no progress. But you're actually descending in a spiral, and each revolution takes you deeper into yourself. The catalyst for transformation is usually suffering. Not the noble, meaningful suffering we see in movies, but the stupid, repetitive, mundane suffering of running into the same wall over and over. The 20th time you date the same type of unavailable person. The 50th time you sabotage yourself right before success. The 100th time you have the same fight with the same family member about the same issue. Eventually, if you're lucky, you hit what AA calls rock bottom, the place where the pain of staying the same finally exceeds the fear of changing. But here's what nobody tells you. Rock bottom isn't a place, it's a decision. Some people hit it after one failed relationship, others need 30. Some hit it with their careers intact, others need to lose everything. Rock bottom is simply the moment you decide you can't do this anymore, that something has to die for something else to be born. The death phase of transformation is brutal. Everything you thought you knew about yourself becomes suspect. Your story about who you are and why you're that way starts to crack. The identity you've spent decades constructing reveals itself as arbitrary, chosen not by you, but by circumstances, trauma, other people's expectations. You realize you're not a fixed entity, but a collection of habits, patterns, and defense mechanisms that solidified into what you call self. This is the dark night of the soul that every spiritual tradition warns about. You're no longer who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. You're in psychological no man's land, and it's terrifying. Your old life doesn't fit anymore, but you don't have a new one yet. Friends don't recognize you. Family members feel threatened. Your own mind becomes unfamiliar territory. I went through this in my 30s. Everything I'd built, career, relationships, identity, suddenly felt like a costume I'd outgrown. But I didn't know what to replace it with. For months, I was nobody. Not depressed exactly, but empty. Not lost, but between maps. I couldn't go back to who I'd been, but I couldn't yet see who I was becoming. This liminal space is where most people give up. They retreat to the familiar, even if it's painful, because at least it's known. They'd rather be miserable than uncertain. The temptation to go back is overwhelming. Your old patterns call to you like sirens, promising comfort, familiarity, the relief of knowing who you are even if you don't like it. But if you can stay in the uncertainty, something remarkable happens. New parts of yourself begin to emerge. Not the parts you planned or expected. Transformation isn't that orderly. Instead, aspects of yourself you'd buried, denied, or never knew existed begin to surface. The artistic side you suppressed for practicality. The anger you buried under niceness. The tenderness you hid behind cynicism. These emerging parts don't fit neatly together at first. You're a walking contradiction, changing daily, sometimes hourly. One moment you're more confident than ever. The next, you're paralyzed by doubt. You're becoming, and becoming is inherently unstable. You're liquid when you've always been solid, and it's disorienting for everyone, especially yourself. The shadow work is essential and excruciating. Jung understood that transformation requires integrating the parts of yourself you've rejected. The selfish parts, the lazy parts, the cruel parts, the weak parts. Not indulging them, but acknowledging them, understanding them, finding their legitimate needs and meeting them consciously rather than having them run your life from the unconscious. A man I know discovered during his transformation that beneath his people-pleasing exterior was rage. Decades of suppressed anger at having to be the good one, the responsible one, the one who never caused problems. When that rage first surfaced, he was terrified he'd become abusive, violent, everything he'd defined himself against. But by facing it, feeling it, understanding its message, he integrated that energy and became genuinely assertive for the first time in his life. The body changes during transformation. Old illnesses mysteriously resolve. New symptoms appear. Your sleep patterns shift. Your appetite changes. Your body is reorganizing itself around a new psychological structure. This isn't metaphorical. Studies show that significant psychological change creates measurable biological changes, from gene expression to brain structure. Relationships become the crucible where transformation is tested. Some people will try to push you back into your old shape, not from malice but from their own need for stability. Your transformation threatens their equilibrium. If you change, maybe they'll have to change. If you break free, what does that say about their own imprisonment? You'll lose people. This is non-negotiable. Some relationships were based entirely on your old patterns, and without those patterns, there's no relationship. The drinking buddies when you get sober. The complaint partners when you stop being negative. The codependent relationships when you develop boundaries. These losses are necessary, but they're still losses, and they need to be grieved. New people appear, attracted to who you're becoming rather than who you were. These relationships feel different, cleaner, clearer, based on recognition rather than need. You're not looking for someone to complete you because you're learning to be complete. You're not seeking validation because you're learning to validate yourself. The practices that support transformation are usually simple but not easy. Meditation, not to feel better, but to observe your mind's patterns. Therapy, not to be fixed, but to be witnessed. Journaling, not to record events, but to dialogue with parts of yourself. Bodywork, not to look better, but to release what's been stored in your tissues. Dreams become important during transformation. Your unconscious is working overtime, processing changes, integrating new material, showing you what you can't yet consciously see. The dreams might be disturbing. Death, destruction, chaos. But they're showing you what's dying, what's being destroyed, what chaos is necessary for new order to emerge. There's a point in transformation where you realize you can't go back. You've changed too much. The old life doesn't fit, couldn't fit, even if you tried to squeeze back into it. This is both liberating and terrifying. You've burned the bridges, but you can't yet see the other shore. You're committed to becoming, but you don't know what you're becoming. The integration phase is subtle but crucial. The new parts of yourself that emerged chaotically begin to organize. The contradictions start to resolve into paradoxes you can hold. You're both strong and vulnerable, both independent and interconnected, both certain and uncertain. You're larger than you were because you contain more of yourself. Your values clarify, not the values you inherited or adopted, but the ones that emerge from your own experience. You know what matters to you, not what should matter, but what actually does. This creates a new kind of confidence, not the brittle confidence of ego, but the flexible strength of authenticity. The transformed self isn't perfect. It's not enlightened or fully healed or done growing. It's simply more real, more integrated, more consciously chosen. You still have problems, but they're your problems, not patterns you inherited. You still have flaws, but they're your actual flaws, not defenses against wounds. You're still growing, but you're growing from your own roots, not grafted onto someone else's trunk. The most surprising thing about transformation is how ordinary it feels once it's integrated. You expect it to feel completely different, but you just feel like yourself. The difference is that yourself now means something deeper, truer, more authentic than before. You're not a new person. You're finally the person you always were beneath all the adaptations. Looking back, you can see that transformation wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about stopping being someone else. It was about shedding the false selves you'd constructed and finding what remained. It was about excavation, not construction, discovery, not creation. The cycles continue. Transformation isn't a one-time event, but an ongoing process. You'll hit new edges, new deaths, new rebirths. But now you know the territory. You know that death leads to life, that confusion leads to clarity, that disintegration leads to reintegration at a higher level. You've learned the most important thing. You can survive your own transformation. You can let parts of yourself die without dying. You can change without losing yourself. In fact, you can only find yourself through change. The psychology of self-transformation is ultimately about trust. Trust in the process. Trust in your resilience. Trust that something in you knows how to grow toward wholeness. It's about surrendering control while taking responsibility. It's about letting go while holding on. It's about dying while living. Most people live their entire lives without ever really transforming. They change jobs, relationships, locations, but never themselves. They rearrange the furniture but never renovate the house. They treat symptoms but never address causes. They manage their problems but never transform them. But for those who dare to truly transform, who risk the death of who they've been for the birth of who they could be, life becomes an entirely different experience. Not easier, but more authentic. Not painless, but more meaningful. Not perfect, but more whole. The invitation is always there, waiting. Your authentic self is always pressing against the boundaries of your false self, creating symptoms when ignored, dreams when sleeping, synchronicities when you're paying attention. The question isn't whether you'll transform. Life will force some change regardless. The question is whether you'll do it consciously or unconsciously, willingly or resistantly, partially or completely. The choice to transform is the choice to become who you already are, but haven't yet dared to be. It's the choice to stop living as a reaction to your past and start living as a creation of your present. It's the choice to die as who you were told to be, and be born as who you actually are. That's the psychology of self-transformation. Not becoming someone new, but finally, courageously, authentically, becoming yourself.